That's what he talks.
Welcome to the maybe most controversial panel on Israel, war within, war without. We're going to be very pragmatic. We're going to try to see, we're going to explore, explain, and engage, and try to see how we can hopefully resolve the wars both within and without through constructive engagement with you, the audience. So we look forward to constructive questions in the last 15 minutes. I'm Nomi Bar-Yaakov. I'm a fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and I've had the honor to accept an invitation from the marvelous Dr. Ebtissam Al-Kitbi, who is responsible for this extremely important dialogue at this very important time. The Abu Dhabi strategic debate holds a very special place, I think, in trying to resolve conflicts, and unfortunately there are quite a few of those at the moment, so let's see what we can do. So thank you very much, Dr. Ebtissam, and to all the staff at the Emirates Policy Center. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce very briefly our distinguished three speakers, because their biographies are on the app of the Abu Dhabi strategic debate, and you can look at those. To my left is Shira Efron, a distinguished fellow and chair of the Israel program at RAND, and she has a history of working with a number of leading think tanks in Washington and advising the UN in Jerusalem, UNSCO, the United Nations Special Coordinator's Office on Gaza. To her left is Dr. David Markovsky, who is a Ziegler Distinguished Fellow at WINEP, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, engaged for many decades with pan-Arab Israeli issues, and a former senior advisor to John Kerry when he was Secretary of State under President Obama. And to his left, last but not least, is retired Brigadier General Udi Dekel, who's going to open this debate by dealing with the explaining and the exploring of what Israeli society is going through, or has been going through, especially but not only post 7th October, a trauma that also has affected Israel, not of course in the same nature and scope as the way it has affected Gazans, but nevertheless it is an important factor in understanding the current trends in Israeli society. We will explore the division, the policy of divide and rule that has been prevalent for many years, the impact it has had on the fabric, the very nature of the fabric of what was at least a democratic society, where that is heading, what that means for internal policies as well as external. And I'd also like you, Udi, to address the very key question of what is the end game of this government as you are looking through as you're moving through the motions of where we're at. Where is this government heading? It is an election year. We'll go through the elections later on and see what is possible, what it's looking like, how to engage with the different actors so as to be constructive. But you have the floor in explaining where we're at, how we got there, and how do we move forward.
Thank you, Nomi. Thank you so much, Dr. Ebtissam, for high-quality conference and your excellent staff. This is the best show in the region, and we learn a lot. I can tell you from the Israeli point of view, to sit here in the conference room and to listen that Israel is the main problem in the Middle East, especially from the experts from Iran, without telling the real story, the beginning of the big change in the area of the Middle East. I'm speaking about October 7th, to listen and to hear that the proxy system is a system for achieving stability in the region in order to deter Israel and the US to attack in Iran. And nobody tell about what happened before October 7th and what happened during October 7th. Nobody said about Iran's decision to attack Israel in April 2024 by launching salvo of rockets, attack UAVs, after Israel attacked the command post of the Iranians in Damascus. From that point, they control over all the proxies that attacked Israel in that time, and they respond again by solving missiles, surface-to-surface missiles against Israel as the revenge to the killing of Hassan Nasrallah and Hania, two people which contribute for the stability in the region, of course, and not tell that story from the beginning. And Israel didn't want to be in a war situation in the region. Israel believed in that time that we can keep the situation calm. I'm not saying that I'm supporting the position or the policy of the government of Israel, but the policy of the government of Israel, especially leading by Netanyahu, was to keep the situation quiet, to contain the problems, and not to initiate any activity, war situation or operations, only response to the challenges of the other side. And we have to understand this. This is the concept of our government, and especially of Netanyahu. Netanyahu doesn't like the, let's say, the discussions about the end state. He don't believe in end state. He doesn't see any way to achieve the end state in our region. And he believed that we have to adjust our policy according to the changes and the developments in the region, and by that leading Israel to better position. And if you look upon, you know, since October 7th, in the Lebanese side, Syria, Iran, the Houthis, in all those areas, we operated as response of the attack which are coming from the other side. And now the outcome, I believe, that can be positive to the region. I agree with all of the people which are saying that after the military efforts have to come the political efforts. And I believe that we are in the time of the political efforts. This is the time now to shape a better reality in the Middle East. And I don't sure that everybody understand the main change in Israel concept vis-a-vis the relations of Israel to the region. Because let's say 5 years ago, the concept of Israel was that we are, sorry to say that, villa in the jungle. We have to protect ourselves by our own dome, our own wall, all the irons, in order to prevent spillover of negative activity from the region inside Israel. And we believe that we can keep it forever or for long term. And then came the change, understanding that we have to be part of the region, that we can do a lot of things together. We can contribute and getting benefits as well. And coming Abraham Accords, which now it's the main issue again on the table. And this is a very important message that I would like to share with you. Because in Israel, we initiated coalition with supporting the cooperation. Let's use the word cooperation. I know that the word of normalization, somebody don't look that this is a good term. Better cooperation between Israel and the region. And we try to push our government to go in that direction, and this is the time to do that. And when we check the public opinion in Israel, we can see that 70% of the Israelis supporting, of course, coalition between Israel and the Arab countries, and they are ready in that term, in that situation, to go forward between Israel and the Palestinians in order to shape two-state for two-people reality. This is a great issue in Israel. The people of Israel supporting two-state for two-people reality between us and the Palestinians is part of regional cooperation and coalition, which together we can challenge with the main issues that were here during the last 2 days. And I hope that this message will be clear enough. I know that this is the message even of Mr. Netanyahu, that not everybody like him, but of course the message of the other parties in Israel, which we like to see that coming ahead after the elections in Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Udi. So an important component, I think, with the maybe misunderstanding in the Arab world about the two states and the 70% supporting the two states is that the 70% support a demilitarized Palestinian state.
Yes.
And I think it's important to mention it just in order for transparency and honesty here. I think it is important that 70% support this kind of thing. And I think this is, again, a point at which dialogue is crucial. And later on, we will talk about the disarmament of Gaza, the necessary measures that should be taken also against settlers, in de-radicalization. I think there are parallels that are missing in the plan, but I'd like to turn to David, because David is based in Washington, unlike the other two panelists, and he has a close relationship with the White House, with both administrations. And maybe you're in a good position to try to explain how US President Donald Trump is feeling. Well, how far is he going to go in order to ensure that the two-state vision is actually implemented? Because in Israel, everyone knows that the only man in the world that has the power to influence Israel, because Israel is existentially dependent on the US, is Trump. We've seen in the demonstrations that the posters, these are the Saturday night demonstrations against the judicial overhaul, against the government for the freeing of the settlers, for ending the occupation, that massive banners were put up. President Trump, we need you, end the conflict. And I think that, again, we would also like, to explore within trends in Israeli society what that movement that Netanyahu is so adamant is destructive has actually achieved, and maybe how a constructive dialogue with the Arab world could support it. But David, on Washington, how do you see US President Donald Trump moving ahead, especially in light of Israel's attack on Doha and Turkey? We've heard a lot today about Turkey's constructive role in getting to the Sharm agreement. We all know the agreement and the 20-point plan has so many gaps that need to be filled in the implementation. You're at the heart of the matter. You understand the Israelis, you understand the Americans. Where are we? Where are we? And where are we going? Where are we heading?
No, it's a delight to be with you, Naomi, and great to be with Shira and Udi. And I add my thanks to Dr. Abtesam, and I'll add her staff, Amani and Magda and the whole team, for really, once again, year after year, putting out a really first-rate conference. So thank you very much, Dr. Abtesam. Look, I think this president, he likes to think that he doesn't come from the old school. He's a businessman. He's not a professional diplomat. And he's someone who I think believes that he's uniquely positioned to do things that others can't do. He relishes being a disruptor. And I think until the Doha attack, he basically thought he had two separate policies. One was a policy in dealing with Netanyahu against Hamas, and one was a Gulf policy, which was more transactional, of course based on security for the Gulf, but also based on investments with the Gulf. And he had a summit in May and to visit Saudi, the Emirates, and Qatar. And I think he saw those two policies as going in parallel. I think the Doha summit, the Doha attack was a game changer in the sense that for the first time he believed that those two policies could possibly be on a collision course. And that is something he has not wanted, because these have been two pillars for him in the Middle East. So I think he sprung into action. He is not as focused on the Palestinian issue, is true, but he is very focused on what Gulf leaders whisper to him. Just as he is with Netanyahu, he lives in the world of tend to be men, strong men, and he feels that he has this chemistry with different ones of them. Some of them, very much will surprise people. Israelis can't imagine how he could have such a close relationship with Erdogan of Turkey, for example. and yet he doesn't see a contradiction. Here he's trying to show he could have a relationship with Shara as he hosted him in the White House. So he sees politics as really a set of personal relations. Biden also, by the way, I think had that, but in a different way, but I don't know if we have time to get into that now. But I think this president, he's very, he knows like his polling data in Israel. He follows that. He knows that in much of Europe he's hated, but in Israel he's so well liked. And he says that after he retires, he could go run and be prime minister of Israel. He's someone that I think the world has figured out very quickly, and maybe the Arab leaders are among the first to figure this out, but Netanyahu is probably not far behind the Arabs in finding out that this is someone who could be flattered easily. You don't just give him the Nobel Prize, you give him the Israel Prize and the Nobel Prize, and you add 3 other prizes. He's not alone in that approach, Netanyahu, to be fair to him. So where is he now on this? I think his basic view is he's said to people this is his greatest achievement of his life. I think he said at one point to reporters, this would get me into heaven. That he sees this as a great personal triumph at a time where the Ukraine war, there has been a lot of frustration. He's had frustration in other areas, and the tariffs and things like that, and this is one of great success. In the short term, I don't see him letting go of this so quickly, but people are right to question his attention span. That's because it's all based on a very shaky premise, which we haven't really discussed at this conference. Maybe also the next panel will get into this, which is in Donald Trump's mind, this whole ceasefire is based not just on phase 1 of the transactional part. You end the war, you get the hostages out, you get the prisoners and detainees out, but that Hamas disarms. And he's been told that this is really going to happen. But he says if they don't disarm, finish them off. And he says this repeatedly on the record. And by the way, he talks to journalists every single day in the Oval Office. He cannot resist. Journalists can get through to him on his cell phone. I don't remember this in American history. The journalists have had such access to him, and that sometimes he initiates and calls them. So he's constantly talking to the press in a way that I don't recall any president being like this. But it's all based on this premise, and it's a questionable premise, is will Hamas disarm? And I'm going to put forward an idea which I'm sure will cause a lot of controversy in the room, but I think if we're calling this the Abu Dhabi strategic debate, we have to put some of the tough issues on the table.
Absolutely.
That's our job. And not whether we agree or disagree is not the point. And that is, people say, oh, so David, you see the 2-state solution is 2 states in Gaza. There's 2 zones in Gaza. There's the yellow line. You could call it West Berlin. It's on the eastern part of Gaza, actually, and East Berlin, or you could call it the green zone and the red zone. Call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. Israel has pulled out of 47% of the west, out of Gaza. And yet, the question is, who's going to actually go in there to do Trump's vision? If he's right, Trump, that Hamas will disarm, then it's an easy job. Then the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, can go in and just blow up tunnels, collect the weapons, and that's it. And then there could be a post-Hamas Gaza that I think we would all like. But what if he's wrong? What if Hamas does not disarm voluntarily? The idea of disarming them against their will is a completely conceptual leap that this ISF isn't going to do. They're not a fighting force. And I think, we have Israelis on the panel, they could speak more authoritatively than me, but from my going back and talking to Israeli officials regularly, their assumption is, A, Hamas does not disarm, and B, if Israel doesn't disarm them, nobody will. Now, does that mean we're going back to the end of the ceasefire and it's going to be like Gaza City? I don't know. It might be below the radar, the threshold. But this 47% is become the wild part of Gaza that nobody's going in, and Israel will feel that it has to do it by itself. And I'm concerned how these 2 zones will coexist. I think you could have a whole Gaza as a goal. Shira and I just wrote a piece together in the national interest on empowering the Palestinian Authority as an end state so that there is a goal, but it's going to start probably very unevenly in these two zones, where maybe in the green zone, if you want to call it that, maybe we'll see construction of Egyptian companies and in Rafah as the test case. Kushner has said on the record, he's Trump's son-in-law and he's his envoy. He said, we're not going to put a penny into the other part of Gaza. So we're going to see two Gazas, and if Hamas doesn't disarm, because no Arab official that I talked to says, we're not going in to disarm them. We're willing to be, it's not just ceremonial, and maybe we'll be on the border, and maybe we can provide some humanitarian assistance, which is important, but we're not going to be a fighting force. So I think this is a big question about Trump, Naomi, that we don't know if phase 2 is going to be real, even though I think the president very much wants it to be so, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is not about to go against the president, but I don't know how long the president is committed, and we shouldn't take it for granted.
Thank you very much, David. I do have to say that the speaker's notes are very clear that we have to speak for 3 minutes. Okay. So just
13.
Please make note of that. No, Shira.
We have only 3 minutes.
I will give Shira a bit more time, but I just want to add to that Jared Kushner has also said that construction will begin in the zone that Israel controls.
That I said that.
He has said that on the record. He said it already in his first visit. He said construction.
On the Israeli zone, yeah.
Yes, in the Israeli zone, and I don't want to get into the yellow the zone that Israel controls. I'd also like to state for the record and transparency that the goals have already shifted since Trump has given Israel the green light to target Hamas within the zone that Israel controls, and that wasn't part of the original Sharm agreement. So again, we just need to be clear on the implementation of the 20-point plan. Trump does not really have the attention for the detail or the knowledge of the detail, and in this conflict, in every conflict, the devil is in the detail, but in this conflict, there is an awful lot of detail. And unless the detail is clarified and the end goal is clarified. So Shira, enlighten us, you've just written a piece with David, the end goal, does the government see it? It's election year, so it's not just this government won't last. I think that it will be useful to explain the trends and what is expected within this election year. The fabric of Israeli society is changing. There are conflicting movements. I think explain what the elections look like, when you think they're going to happen, what kind of coalitions are likely to be formed, and what does that mean for the end game? There has to be an end game.
So thank you for this question. Lovely to be here. Thank you, the EPC and Dr. Ibtissam and her team for inviting me. And a word before Dr. Randa Slim said yesterday, Dr. Ibtissam, that you have inspired generations of Arab women, and I'll just say not just Arab, but all women, and probably a lot of men too. So thank you for that. There is a lot to unpack here, including the conditions on disarmament. Before I get into Israel, we have to just say a word of caution. When we say disarmament, different actors mean different things, and there is a way forward, which actually the Europeans are trying to advance now, when we would be talking about starting with decommissioning of the big stuff, the tunnels, the production facilities, the missiles, the rockets. It's less politically controversial for Hamas. Hamas essentially said that they would consider giving up their offensive weapons. I don't know what defensive weapons are, but fine.
The big weapons. They're the big weapons.
Let's give the big things that, by the way, Israel already eliminated many of them, so it's much easier to do, because the most critical thing, and I think it goes to the point that David was starting with, and Udi as well, is to keep the momentum going. And before I want to go to the Israelis, I know I need to be mindful of time. I speak fast. I'll just say we have to think of where we are at the moment, and if we start getting bogged down in the details, we're never going to get anywhere. Because think about it, we're 25 months after October 7, a war that started with the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. and it continued with a war that led to the worst killing and displacement of Palestinians since the Nakba. And paradoxically, right, the Palestinians have now more support around the world and more countries recognizing the Palestinian state, but in practice, they're as far from a state, an effective state, than they've ever been. And Israel squashed its adversaries, restored deterrence, became the security enforcer of this region, whether many people here like it or not. But the fact that Israel's legitimacy and popularity in this region and around the world is it's at its worst. So both sides and this region entirety has to find a way forward. On Israel, the Israeli politics, there's a sentence in Hebrew, it's a prophecy is giving to the silly, the foolish. It's translated, we can't guess what's going to happen in Israeli politics. Polling indicates that most of the Israeli public does not support this specific government. However, if you look at who's suitable to be prime minister, Netanyahu is still getting the highest results. I can very well see a situation where Netanyahu continues to be a prime minister, but with a different coalition, where this coalition is, 50 shades of right. So the most to the right, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and the Haredi ultra-Orthodox are out. But we have Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid and Gadi Eisenkot, all those who say that they want to replace Netanyahu, are actually sitting with him and going toward another coalition. In the meantime, Netanyahu operates best in what we call the twilight zone, right? This idea of muddling through, not making decisions. There's a reason why he was so passive all these years. He's a product of all the pressures put on him, and those pressures come from his political base and his coalition partners and from Trump. And I think now, thank goodness, the pressure from President Trump is stronger. But he's still going to be pressured by his political base. He's going to try to muddle through. I think everyone is asking us around here if Israel is going to return to war. I hope not, and I hope I'm not wrong, but there's no appetite in Israel for war. We could see the present trends continue, which is Israel's MO of mowing the grass in Gaza, West Bank, and in Lebanon. You asked about the Israeli public. Udi insinuated the two-state terminology is the term itself is toxic. If you ask them about different concepts of partition, you see that you get 50% of the Israeli public is in favor of some partition. When you add regional integration and security guarantees, the number jumps. And this is when we have 25 years of all forces working against, including an Israeli government, working against any peace process, right? And we had 4 rounds of Gaza, an intifada, this war now, with the right leadership and a feasible plan, as the Israeli public has done every time there was a plan, the Abraham Accords being the last one. The Israeli public was willing to compromise. It moved to the right, but willing to compromise and for peace. And as much beef as I have with this government, if you look at the Israeli public, and it doesn't make it to the news usually, but unlike members of the government, most of the Israeli publics do not care about 1 square kilometer here and 1 hilltop in a place they've never met. They want to wake up in the morning and know that their neighbors don't want to kill them. That's it. And if we can get that secured, I think you can get an Israeli partner. It will be very hard to get with this Israeli government.
Thank you very much, Shira. So you touched upon a number of important points here. The first speaker that's mentioned the West Bank. It was, and of course, very important. There is a division in the way the Israeli public views what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. And of course, it's very important to integrate the debate and ensure that the West Bank is a part of it. As part of that, I'd actually like to ask Udi, as the military person, the security person here, as former head of military planning, J5, Shira had mentioned the security guarantees. This is one element that is missing in the discussion coming from the Arab world. For the Arab world, it's pretty obvious that normalization, for them, from their perspective, not from an Israeli perspective, provides security. And we've seen it with Egypt, with Jordan for many years, and more recently with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And I think it's because of the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain that the West Bank wasn't annexed, and clearly there are issues there. But in terms of practical security guarantees, and of course with polling, it's all a question of how you design the question and what you ask the public. What kind of security guarantees do you think would be necessary in order to persuade the majority of the Israeli public that a Palestinian state is in the national interest of Israel?
I'm not sure that there is connection to say that this is a national interest of Israel. But Israel, in order to exist and coexistence and creating, as I said before, coalition with as big as we can with the Arab countries, this is now the main issue. During the negotiation, I was the head of the negotiation team with the Palestinians under Prime Minister Olmert, and in that time, even the Palestinians agreed that the Palestinian state will be demilitarized, okay? And there was all the security appendix of that draft, because it wasn't an agreement, unfortunately, is complete, covered the main challenges even today. The same is the demand of Israel in Gaza, that if the PA returned back to Gaza, one of the missions of the PA, according to the vision of President Abbas, Mahmoud Abbas, one weapons, one authority, one law, and demilitarized. Okay? Israel can accept it. Israel can live with that. But somebody has to deal with Hamas in that case. But basically, this is the scenario. Third, it's very important for us, the regional security cooperation. It's worked very well. In the beginning of the war, as you know, some of you, we are sitting together with our partners in the region around the same table in CENTCOM, and we know how to do things together, and it's better. By that, you can achieve the goals of security, stability, not only against missiles, not only missile defense, also dealing with the panel before spoke about what is the issue of smuggling of weapons and the issue of supporting non-state actors and other things. By regional cooperation, you can deal with that in better way. So that can be part of any future agreement between us and the Palestinians. But there is another aspect which is very important, and I would like to emphasize. It's very important to convince the Palestinians what they have to do. You know, everybody's speaking about the reforms in the Palestinian Authority. What kind of reforms? Who is going to push the Palestinians to implement that reforms? We need the Arab countries to do that. This is not the mission of Israel. They will not accept that will be the mission of Israel. So in any case, I see today that the better way to go forward is not bilateral negotiation. We cannot bridge the gaps in bilateral negotiation. We need a multilateral cover to the process. And in the same time, it's amazing, but in the same time, to using a coercion mechanism. The US have the pressure to enforce Israel to get the arrangements. The Arab countries has the power to enforce the Palestinian Authority to do what they have to do. And unfortunately, I don't like it, but unfortunately, Qatar and Turkey, we see that they have the ability to enforce the Hamas to accept the rule of the game. So we need to do it together, in the same time which creating the cover of the regional supporting the process, using enforcement mechanism in order to convince each of the side to do what they have to do. And I can tell you something, secret, nobody listen. For Netanyahu, it's better to get the order from President Trump, because in that case, he doesn't have to explain to his, let's say, extreme, radical, right-wing parties in the coalition why he decided to do that. This is an order. We got it from President Trump. It's easy to Netanyahu to pass this kind of decisions in the government of Israel.
Thank you, Udi, and very important points there, and very important to, again, remember that Trump is the only person that has that leverage and that Israel is existentially dependent on the US. With that in mind, David, looking at the 20-point plan, and Shira spoke a little bit about the very complex DDR issue, and we won't have time to go into much detail there, but the de-radicalization is a very important issue, and of course we know many models, some failed, some haven't. There is no mention of de-radicalization of the settlers, and the settler violence has been, especially in the last month of October, but unprecedented. I think the audience here is very well aware of not only the settler violence, but also the actions of the army and the expulsion. And if you roam around the West Bank, every village and every town has barbed wire around it, and thousands of checkpoints are mushrooming by the minute. Do you think there's any chance that there will be more equality, that there will also be the de-radicalization of the settlers will also be addressed?
Right. Okay. I think that, look, we're talking about a minority of the settlers. Just to be fair about it, because the image might be that all the settlers at night are vigilantes. Maybe we're talking about 1% or 0.5%, but the fact that they do it unchecked is terrible. It's a tragedy, and it's partly because the police minister, Ben Gvir, doesn't enforce the law. And I was at the Central Command with the head of the Central Command, I don't know, last summer, and he said, look, I'm embarrassed to say that we're not on the same page with the police force of the West Bank, called Shai. That's the name of the district in the West Bank. And until there's a new government, I don't see this changing. I think it's a source of embarrassment to the military. I know you could see their frame saying, well, I saw this guy in a uniform, I saw that guy in a uniform standing by. I'm not talking about reservists, but I'm saying the leadership, when you talk to the military, it's a source of humiliation that this is happening. And I think that just as we are all within our rights to, and I want to talk about this because it's about how do we engage moderates and the like, non-state actors, and you heard Dr. Abdul Munim Said Ali, Paul Salem, a bunch of people in the audience at different panels referred to this, but this issue of the non-state actor eating away at the state, at its very legitimacy, I think this is a challenge for both, and I think, yes, Israelis should stop the settler vigilantism. Again, a small minority, but very serious issue, just as it also wants Hamas to stop. I'm not making moral equivalencies about blowing people up, but a bomb and a bulldozer, but it's both very serious. And I would also, given this conference at EPC, when people say, well, what can I do that can make a difference? I truly believe, just as you would be right to say, I want to hold Israel to a standard on the settler vigilantism, I do think Arab governments also need to be public in the way they speak privately, which I hear all the time privately, about the non-state, that we cannot allow Hamas and all these groups, Hezbollah, to erode. They're cancerous to the country, and this settler vigilantism is cancerous to Israel. And you could be, each side should be public about both sides. You want to publicly criticize correctly, in my view, the extreme right in Israel, call for that public discourse. It should be a united discourse of all the people who want, like us, who want peace and a better future in dignity for Israelis and Palestinians and Arabs alike, to call out these non-state actors that are eroding the legitimacy of states in the Middle East, or else states do not have a chance. And I don't have time to get into the Israeli elections, but a lot is in the balance about institutions of the state. And it's something that affects not just Israel, but in the Arab world. And I think this is an issue. We in the United States would not tolerate this, and such non-state actors doing this. But it needs to be called out publicly, and not just whispered. Both sides. Don't just call out the Israelis, call out the Arabs too. And if you're Israeli, don't just call out the Arab side, call out the Israelis too.
Thank you, David. So we have 5 minutes before I'd like to open the floor, because the most interesting part of every discussion is always the questions we receive from the audience. And many good points have been made here, including Udi mentioning the necessity for a multilateral process. The multilateral process is not only one that could help resolve Gaza, as we're seeing there's sort of a hodgepodge there of different multilaterals within there. There is also Lebanon, there's also Syria, there's also Iran, there's also Yemen, factions in Iraq. You know, there's no shortage of conflicts for a multilateral process to really address those in a very laser-targeted fashion. So since we are in this very important Abu Dhabi strategic debate here, I would like to each panelist, and I'm going to hold you to it, 60 seconds, 1 minute to think, what kind of multinational process would you like to see that could potentially address all those issues? Would you do it separately, bilaterally? How would you tailor a process to address the potential negative trajectory and turn it to a positive one? And I would just like to mention, as chair, build into it, if you may, if you think it's relevant, empowering the civil society in Israel that has worked so hard to fight the negative trajectories. Thank you.
So
I'm starting with Shira, and we're doing.
But I will take also my time from the previous round, if you don't mind, because I do think that before we get into this, we have to make sure the momentum continues. And I think there's something pressing that might be discussed in the next panel, but if it's not, I'd like to bring it up. We cannot wait until all the conditions are met to move forward in Gaza. There's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and the fact is that while we're all waiting to see what's going to happen, funding has paused. I can't believe we're doing this. There are UN officials here, Nikolai Mladenov and Robert Seri, former. We're still counting trucks without thinking what's in the trucks. There's no water, sanitation infrastructure, medical response. Gaza needs 300,000 tents, and these are not your recreation REI tents. Winter is coming. These things have to come in, and they have to come in now, and everything is on pause. And you can have a multinational component to this too. By the way, also on disarmament that we discussed, this is also a multinational effort with bringing different actors to this, because if anyone is going to collect arms from Hamas, it's going to be the Palestinians, and they have to be pressured, the PA by Saudi Arabia here, and the UAE, and Jordan, and Egypt, and of course there's Qatar, and Turkey on the other side. And I'll just say one word on this, and this is also a multinational effort. We're talking about, you know, we're 4 Jews on this state, but we have to talk about this idea of Palestinian agency, and Palestinian agency has to come through a complex regional effort. There's no other way. The Palestinian Authority has many, many, many problems. Many of them are Israel's fault, but not only. They can claim credit for many of their failures. We have to press them to reform. We have to link their reforms to specific milestones that get them to stuff into Gaza. And there are specific institutions that have to be brought into Gaza at the moment, because with all our fantasies of bringing an international police force, let's imagine this, they will arrest someone and bring them to court under what law? The British Mandate? The Sharia law? It has to be a Palestinian law, and therefore I think we have to move away from these maximalist ideas that all of us in this region have, and start building, you know, block by block gradualism and bringing the Palestinian Authority back in the institutions. And eventually they have to go to elections because they're not legitimate with their own people.
So empowering the Palestinians, regional role in doing so, and yes, long overdue reforms, long overdue elections, and that would certainly help Israeli-Palestinian relations. David, 1 minute, and you'll also get the chance, all of you, to respond at the very end to a wrap-up. So just let's keep it short now, otherwise we won't have time.
Look, Shira mentioned reform, so I won't repeat that. I'll just mention and I won't repeat what I said about the need to publicly call out the non-states that are eating, like I said, eroding the cancer of these states. But I think 2 points then I will focus on. One is, which is I think the Super Bowl or the World Cup of all peace agreements that I think could really make a difference would be the Saudis. I don't see it before the elections, but I do see it under Donald Trump. I think this is, you know, people want to talk about his Nobel Prize. I think he thinks he can get more than one if he pulls off a Saudi-Israeli deal. And so I think that this would be something the Saudis are insisting on negotiations on the Palestinian issue. I know there'll be people questioning on the Abraham Accords, is it a bridge or a bypass road? I think it could be a bridge. I think the Emiratis have proved it's a bridge in many ways because they were the ones on annexation that said if you go down this road, you're going to risk something with us. And that did have an impact. People do feel they have something to lose. But I think the Saudi normalization is the one game changer in the region that could really make a difference. And the other one I would add, which people have alluded to in different times, and I want to stay within my limits, I can't really expand, is the IMEC issue of regional integration, economic integration, because the forces of people who really want change in the region, many in the high-tech sector, in Tel Aviv, and not just in Haifa, and in all the different parts of Israel, this would empower those moderates who really want to be part of the Middle East. And I think that this is something to think about, the role of economics, which has been a theme of this conference. We could expand it here at this time. So those would be my two, would be the Saudi issue and IMEC. I'll stop with that.
The Saudi issue would have to wait for the elections.
Right, until the
Otherwise,
elections.
Netanyahu already considers himself an emperor, will consider himself the ruler of the world.
I really agree with what's said before, because we need the cooperation, economic cooperation, technology cooperation, and other things. But I would like to say, we listen about the messages from Lebanon. They need support for recovery. They cannot do it alone. I don't know what will be in Syria. I really don't know what will be in Syria, but the same message comes from Syria. We need more involvement, more support in the process inside Syria, okay? We need the same. We need the same. And I feel very bad about the reluctance of the Arab countries to be part of the international stabilization force in Gaza, because only forces from the region can manage the situation on the ground. The Egyptians know very well how to deal with that. The Jordanians know very well. The Emiratis as well. They have some kind of presence in Gaza, okay? I'm not going to elaborate. I assume that you know that. The Hamas will not attack, okay, will consider twice or more than that before doing something against the Arab forces. And they're reluctant to be part of giving or bringing the change. It's a great problem. It's very nice to sit on the fence, to tell us what we have to do, but when you would like to see the results, you have to be part of it. So it's not enough to prevent, and thank you for that, that by the Arab pressure, they make a pressure upon President Trump in order to convince Israel not to do any annexation in the West Bank, which was very good, because I would like to keep that option alive for political process between us and the Palestinians. But in the same time, we need the Arab intervene, not only in the process, also in the ground, in order to change the reality. Otherwise, we will return to the bad days, as everybody knows very well here.
We need more constructive Arab engagement. There's a direct call for constructive engagement, and I think it's a really important one, and we just need more engagement, full stop. I think we need more engagement on all issues, and you've all made that very clear. I'd like to open the floor to questions. I just would like to remind those asking questions to please introduce themselves briefly, to limit the questions to a minute, to keep it very succinct. And I would like to commence with Odeh Agourdain, please.
Thank you very much. I'm here. My question is to Shira and David. The two of you alluded to the role of Saudi Arabia, which is a game changer. Now, the Saudis have made it clear we want to see a serious path to a Palestinian state. So far, Trump and Bibi have never uttered these words. They seem to be nuclear words. How can we get Trump to move the process by getting the Israelis to accept the concept of a Palestinian state?
Thank you very much, Ode. Excellent question. How do we get Trump to persuade the Israelis that in order to get the Saudi deal, there needs to be a Palestinian state? Next question, Miras Zainbayev, and Miras, apologies if I mispronounce your surname.
Well, thank you very much for this panel. I have quite brief question. Last week we had C5 plus US format. C5 is Central Asia. 5 leaders met with President Trump, and Kazakhstan announced, I'm here, and Kazakhstan announced idea to join Abraham Accords. So how do you see the role of Abraham Accords in peace process in between of Israel and Palestine, and how can the countries outside of the Arab world join or facilitate a process? How do you see a Kazakhstan role in this aspect? Thank you.
Excellent question, succinct. Kazakhstan's role, how do you envisage it, as well as other non-Arab countries? Maria Fantapie, please.
Hi, thank you. My question is for all panelists. It seems that actually each one of them put forward a different sequencing of the implementation of the 20-point plan, though all of them wish for a broader normalization with the Arab world. So can each one of them actually state how the sequencing of the 20-point plan actually should be enacted? Should be first be disarmament and then humanitarian aid and then Palestinian Authority brought in, or should be different sequencing? Because it seems that each one has a different idea of that, in mind, of course, of offering something, offering a sequencing that can also in some way help Israeli-Arab ties.
Thank you, Maria. The question was sequencing. Maybe the question really is whether there needs to be a sequencing or whether all questions also, all issues need to be addressed contemporaneously. Abdullah Al-Junaid, please.
Hi, over here. The question that I would like to pose to the whole panel is, while the Israelis are still addressing Gaza the day after, the region, and especially those who are willing to engage Israel, are raising the following question. Israel the day after Benjamin Netanyahu, what he represents. This is the real challenge. It's about time that you jumpstart your re-engineering of your thinking and start approach the region. And for David in particular, it's not about the 1% or the 2% that the settlers represent. It's what the humiliation on a daily basis that the Palestinians are suffering at every checkpoint. How can you quantify that, please, sir? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. So the day after for Israel, the day after Netanyahu, whether there is any reckoning, healing, settlers, how do we deal with them? That's specifically for David. And I think that's all the questions from the audience, so I just like, as a prerogative of chair, to just maybe, again on a constructive note, what would you like to see in terms of engagement, both Israeli but also the Arab world? How do you foresee a more constructive engagement on, you can choose the fronts because you won't have time to address all of them, but don't repeat each other's points, obviously, so whichever one person address other points. Shira, I'll start with you, then David, and then I'll let you wrap up.
Naomi,
yes.
We have 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Abtissam, for, we have the clocks here, so please, everyone, please stick to them. And I need 5 minutes to wrap up, so I will have 2 minutes to wrap up. So each one has a minute and a half. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ibtisam.
I will try to be brief. I think on Saudi Arabia, whether we are looking at normalization now, I don't think this is coming in the near future. I think the Saudis have said again and again and again what their conditions are, and their conditions are not there. It does not mean that we cannot take steps toward greater regional integration. Her Excellency Manal Radwan is here. She's heard me said it before. There's Mary to speaking to the Israeli public and offering to the Israeli public what the government doesn't show them. But we also have to remember the Saudis have leverage on two key players. First of all, the Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority is indebted to the Saudis now. Reform and the prisoner payment. Yesterday there was news that Mahmoud Abbas, the president, fired his finance minister over the Palestinian prisoner reform. There's a key issue coming. And also, I would hope that when MBS goes to Washington, in addition to the many issues that he has on the agenda, he also has this one. I have to respond to Maria's questions about the sequencing. I don't think we can afford the sequencing. I think we have to do everything at once. The humanitarian cannot wait. Clearly, the linchpin is the UN Security Council resolution that's coming, but we have to start training the Palestinian forces. It's going to take month and month and month. Despite all of us knowing that this was coming, we didn't do it. And the last thing about the Abraham Accords, His Excellency Gargash was here yesterday. He spoke about this, the framework of dialogue and coexistence and acceptance of the narrative and the connection of the people to the land is something that I think is important for both Israelis and the Palestinians, because no one is going anywhere. That is the true fact. So I'll stop.
Thank you.
Look, I think part of the genius of the Abraham Accords was to what I call the chance, at least, of a peace between peoples, not just a peace between governments. Until the Abraham Accords, you've had what I call a mukhabarat peace, an intelligence community peace, where the people closest to dealing with Israel were the Egyptian military, the Jordanian military. It didn't really seep into the society. Maybe because the Abraham Accord countries are not bordering Israel, there is none of the baggage having fought Israel on the battlefield, and it's all much more about upside, and Kazakhstan is certainly further afield. So the economic opportunities, I think, are really great, that people on all sides could see the benefits of peace. To me, this is the core point, which is, you know, when you think of engagement, to Nomi's question, and look, Israel is going into an election year. You're not going to change this government. As much as Oda, I hope I'm wrong, I don't think you're going to change Netanyahu on between now and the elections on getting the Saudis to take away the dimension of the deal of saying you've got to start negotiations on two states. I don't think that's going to happen. He's going to say, I have the best relationship with Trump. I'll get this deal without the precondition, which I don't think he's going to be able to get after the election. And he'll push it off, but say, I'm the only one who can make the deal with the Saudis. I don't think deals are possible now. I think what's possible now is to have Arab leaders talk to the people of Israel. Make this a peace between peoples where you communicate, we want to integrate you in the region. And I think that kind of thing is something that Israel doesn't often hear. You'd say, well, we've said this at this communique, it was at this summit, but they don't hear it. Give interviews to journalists from Israel. Talk to them as leaders, the emirs of all these countries, foreign ministers. Talk to them in this election year. This is a pivotal election year. Will Israel be integrated in this region or not? I think this is an amazing opportunity, and I hope that we won't say, we look back and say we missed the opportunity.
Thank you, David.
And I agree with the others about Abraham Accords, which is a vision. This is a vision for a new Middle East, border Middle East, and cooperation and relations. I agree with the others. About Gaza, the most important things now in Gaza, I'm not going to the sequence because I don't have time, is to create the movement forward, not to stuck now. Because Israel got most of the hostages. And we can stuck in the current situation because we keep what we call the security perimeter, which help us to control that area and prevent any terror attack vis-a-vis Israel. Hamas still control half of Gaza, regain its power then, creating the conditions that the PL will not be able to come back and to take the control of Gaza. And if we stuck in that moment, we will not achieve the goals. So it's very important to create the mechanism that will push both of us to go forward in the implementation of Trump framework, and by that, changing the reality. I would like to say another sentence, because in all of the panels, there was a feeling here that we are in the age of return to a war situation. This is not the picture that I see from Israel. Israel, maybe its story, it's not good for the deterrence to say it loud and clear. Israel is not eager to return back to war situation. 2 years, it's enough, okay? We have a lot of other things to do. We have a lot of other things to fix inside Israel, outside Israel, so we need that time. Please help us to achieve and gain that time for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Udi. I think that the panel has been, there's a consensus, and it's absolutely loud and clear. There's a call for help from the Arab world and beyond the Arab world, Kazakhstan and beyond. There's a call for engagement directly with the Israeli media. There isn't nearly enough of it. I recall Prince Turki of Saudi Arabia giving a pivotal interview to leading Israeli media. That, I think, it's an honest interview with a journalist that is considered an honest broker, not, I think, not a broker, sorry, an honest journalist. That I think could be transformative. Israel, we've heard, not in the mood for war, a call for any form of engagement, any form of dialogue, absolutely critical, because the perceptions in the Arab world of what is happening in Israel and the perceptions in Israel of what is happening in the Arab world are miles apart, and they need to be bridged. So again, thank you, Dr. Ebtissam, for hosting us here. There's a lot of work for the Emirates Policy Center to follow up on, and I would like to ask all of you to thank the panelists, but before that, please stay, because the next panel, key panel, post-war Gaza, security, governance, and challenges, is happening directly after us, and they may ask some of the questions that we didn't have time, they may answer some of the questions that we didn't have time to address. So thank you, and a round of applause.
Thank you, Naomi.